Now we get to the good part, the not-so-secret secrets of policy writing. Most boards know intuitively that they should have policies written down somewhere, and many organizations go to great expense hiring external consultants to help them write down what all their policies should be. The process can get very time-consuming, seem very nitpicky if you're a big picture kind of person, and be very expensive by the time you are done. On one hand, it seems common sense to think that it is better to have some written policies rather than none at all. But on the other hand, having poorly written or disorganized policies, or policies so long and complicated that they are never used, can cause more harm than good. To avoid fuzzy, unclear role syndrome, both board and staff should gain a shared sense of some very, very fundamental governance principles. For example, before even one policy is written down, board members should realize that they exist on behalf of owners, and that all authority ultimately comes from the ownership, with the board standing in a position that serves the owners and leads the organization. That means that theoretically not a single drop of power actually gets to the staff level without first passing through the board of directors. And so, of course, that means that the board has to be very deliberate about how it writes its policies. So, on with sharing with you the 5 not-so-secret secrets. Number 1, when the board writes policies, it must start by conceiving and writing them in 2 main dimensions: policies or instructions to the board itself, and policies directed towards the CEO or executive director. There will be criteria for the success of the board and criteria for the success of the organization, with the CEO being the one point of delegation from the board to the organization. Taking this one simple step should add clarity to the question of who is responsible for what, since all the policies are going to be organized as instructions to the board or instructions to the CEO. Not-so-secret secret number 2 is to further divide the instructions to the CEO into 2 parts. The criteria for the success of the organization really comes down to 2 questions. 1, are we achieving the result we're supposed to achieve? And 2, in so doing, are we avoiding damage to the organization itself? As simple as it sounds, this step is highly critical in avoiding fuzzy, unclear role syndrome, because it gives the board a way to direct and protect the organization without telling the CEO how to do his or her job. In this diagram, consider the star the result the CEO is directed to achieve, while the parallel lines represent limits on the CEO's ability to do things about which the board would have good reason to worry. When criteria for success are organized in this manner, the CEO is then free to choose whatever path is necessary inside board set parameters to achieve the board stated result. Notice that beyond setting those important boundaries, the board doesn't really tell the CEO how to achieve the result. The third not-so-secret secret is to always craft your policies in levels from broad to specific. Make the biggest, most all-encompassing statements first, and then, where necessary, become more and more specific. This approach gives you policies that are both comprehensive on one hand and concise on the other. Being both comprehensive and concise means that you won't have any gaps where confusion or duplication of effort can occur, and your policies will be practical enough to actually use on a day-to-day basis. Fourth, when writing policies, always stop writing policy at the point at which the board feels that any reasonable interpretation of its words by the CEO would suffice. By any reasonable interpretation, I mean any reasonable interpretation. Words are always open to interpretation, and it is folly to expect a CEO to guess what individual board members might be thinking or might have thought when they wrote a particular policy. The board must not expect the CEO to be a mind reader, and instead allow the CEO to make any reasonable interpretation of the board's words that a reasonable person would make. The advantage of using not-so-secret secrets number 3 and number 4 is that the CEO now does not have to ask the board for approval every time they want to do something, but instead knows that he or she will be held accountable for any reasonable interpretation of the authority delegated to him or her by the board. Therefore, the CEO can get more done more efficiently, potentially be more effective, and the board can focus on its governance responsibilities, including the all-important, not-so-secret number 5. Number 5 is so critical to making it all work. Monitor compliance with each of the policies the board has written. If it is worth saying in policy, it's worth checking. By the same token, don't set out to check for accomplishment of any criteria you have not pre-stated. Monitoring must then be done systematically and regularly, with the board checking to see if it adhered to the instructions it wrote for itself, and if the CEO complied with a reasonable interpretation of the policies, describing the results to be achieved and the limitations within which to operate. And because we've written the policies so that they're both concise and comprehensive, this systematic monitoring process gives the board a way to know everything it needs to know. No more long, meandering reports from the staff to the board to wade through, pecking and poking at anything that might represent real information upon which the board should act. So to sum up, the board is going to give instructions to itself and to the CEO. The instructions to the CEO will be divided into criteria for success and damage to avoid. The instructions or policies will be written in levels from broad to specific, stopping at the point at which the board is comfortable with any reasonable interpretation. Finally, the board will check to see if the criteria for itself and the CEO were met by regularly monitoring compliance with all the policies it created. In closing, 2 things. First, the reason I referred to the points here as not-so-secret secrets is because they are derived from the widely published work of John Carver and the policy governance system. There are no real secrets here, although things always sound more intriguing if you call them a secret. Second, I encourage you to distribute the clips to this presentation to all the board members and senior staff in your organization, and others too. Then at your next board meeting, have a conversation about the ideas here and what might be relevant or useful for you. If you have any questions, call me at 1-877-847-4552. This is Susan Mogensen with Brown Dog Consulting. Thank you for listening.